Yay, it worked. But when Lincoln was elected, that would trigger secession. Now let's get to a couple things about that, because the bell rang prematurely last time. I know it's my fault. So busy just trying to help urchins. So we just barely covered the election of 1860, but I think Liz asked yesterday, for some reason that sticks in my head, how did it happen that Lincoln won, even though he wasn't on the ballot of any of the southern states? Well, the Democratic Party split two ways. And the Northern Democrat was Stephen Douglas. The Southerners nominated their own vice president, I think you can see his name, or presidential nominee, John C. Breckinridge. And Breckinridge, he was the Southern pro-slavery one. And another party would split up, and a lot of them were former Whigs, but also kind of split the Democratic Party out. So in a way, they're kind of split three ways. And he was from Tennessee, and their whole thing was this 1 year, the Constitutional Union Party, and there was, basically their platform was Constitution. Yeah, they didn't really have one, just Constitution. We'll say this. Which the Constitution clearly was not working for slavery. And his name was, I swear to you, I'm not making this up, John C. Bell. And, yes, they were both John C. Lincoln was not even on the ballot in any of these states here. Yeah.
So the Democratic Party split into the three, the North, South, and then
kind of border states. In reality, okay, we have two Democrats. We have a Northern Democrat, or Southern Democrat and a Northern Democrat, and then kind of a separate party, which were kind of old Democrats too, with Bell.
So it's not entirely Democratic, but it kind of
Yeah. And so Lincoln, especially because the Democratic Party was split, he won all the northern states, almost all. And because of the population issues in the Electoral College, Lincoln would win the majority in Electoral College, but it'll have less than 40% of the popular vote. And that's what Southerners feared. They knew the majority of the population was not going to vote for Lincoln. But with the Electoral College, which is ironic because part of the reason for the Electoral College was it favored small Southern slave states. And now it seemed to work against them. And Lincoln was elected. And once that Lincoln came, he's John Brown, remember? And so it didn't matter what he said. Yes?
When was Oregon admitted as a state?
Oregon was admitted 4 years earlier, 1856.
Wow.
And they were split. In both these two states were not clear Lincoln states. Actually, the vote was really close in both of these states to get the electors. And so once Lincoln's elected, immediately states started talking about it. And South Carolina's like, should we secede? And somebody came back and said, Georgia's going to. Well, we can't let Georgia secede first, so they seceded. True story, Georgia wasn't quite ready to secede, but that's okay. We don't want Georgia to be this. And so that's the Charleston Mercury. That's where we get Charleston seceding. So these are things we saw in the video, but I filled in a couple of the blanks. The Union is dissolved. I love that one. State flags really would come out of the Civil War, and this is South Carolina's state flag. Now it's blue, the palmetto tree, and the crescent moon. Yeah.
Why is it with the old news documents, some words are super big and the other ones are so small you couldn't read them?
Oh, it's a handbill. So this would be one that we put on. They used to have these big either walls or these kind of round things where you put handbills. They would put that there so you'd see that and walk closer and read. But it's one of the kind of famous handbills. They're like, yes, we seceded. Like, and now you get what you wished. And this is what gets right here. South Carolina, what was the second state to secede? Yeah, and why?
Because they have more slaves.
Yeah, the second most, more than any other state. And then you'll notice in January, a big clump all went about the same time. Those all had about 44 to 45% of the 47% of the population slaves. Texas was kind of an aberration because of its history, and that was the first Confederate state. Yeah.
So how long was it after Lincoln was elected?
Well, he was elected the first week of November, They started doing elections on Tuesday about 20 years earlier, the second Tuesday, or the first Tuesday after the first Sunday in May. And they do it on, you even know why they do it on Tuesday? Monday and Saturday were market days. Sunday was seen not only as a church day, but also the day that everyone got drunk. And remember, different era, right? And so Tuesday was seen as the day that would be a market day. And now we're stuck with Tuesday, which is kind of bad for an industrial world where people work on Tuesdays. And we don't know so much in Helena because we live in Helena. But in a big city, that could be really difficult to vote. Yeah. That's a good question. And the reason why is, okay, these first ones, the percentage of slaves was really low. But these had lower percentage of slaves, so they weren't quite as radicalized for fear of slave rebellion. And they wavered. They were iffy about it. And so right after Sumter was fired on, these ones came. These, no. Because of the percentage of slaves were just that much lower. There would be virtual civil war in Missouri. Heck, Maryland, that's where Washington had to put the mayor of Baltimore in jail because he wanted to make sure troops could get through Baltimore to reinforce Washington, D.C. What a strange time that was. But it's all percentage of slaves. The thing is, though, the Confederacy formed, and they made their capital in Mobile, Alabama, but they needed Virginia. Virginia was the richest and most populous state. And when Richmond joined the Confederacy, that's why they moved the capital to Richmond. They say Richmond. When Virginia joined, they moved to Richmond. Because that was kind of makes sense, it's the richest one. And as soon as this happened, yeah.
What was the second state to this?
Mississippi. And it was all percentage of slaves. The higher the percentage of slaves, the faster they went. Once again, if anybody says it's anything other than slavery, just look at that. And there's President Buchanan. And Buchanan, yeah, they had color photography back then. I think that's a cool picture. He was really good. He went to Grambling. Okay, so, but Buchanan, here's Buchanan. And he's still president for 5 months. 5 months, he's sitting there. The lame duck. Lincoln will not be inaugurated until March. So Lincoln's sitting in Springfield going, wow. You see, FDR was like the same way as the country fell apart in the Great Depression. Great non-pressers. I got what I wanted. Buchanan made a very strong pronouncement about this. Very strong in the way that you would expect from Buck Buchanan. It's unconstitutional to secede. You can't leave. You can't leave the Union. The Union cannot survive a country's leave, or states leave. You can't leave. And do you see a problem with the statement? And then he hid under his desk fearful of assassination. That's absolutely true. He hid in the White House. Terrified. That is a non-statement. Can you think of anything more gutless than that? Now, I know the problem was he's only the lame duck. He's in an awkward situation. But still, you're basically saying, nah. It would have been more productive for him to go, yeah. Pretty good, huh? Actually, you know what he's really saying? Good luck, Lincoln. I wish you luck. Because I throw up my hands. Yeah. He was a doughface. So he was a northerner who favored the South. So with this, there were a couple attempts at compromise. Yeah, the Crittenden Compromise and the 13th Amendment. The Crittenden Compromise said they'll extend 3630 to the sea. They'll just cut California in half and kick that map, if they have to. And who's this guy? John J. Crittenden. Okay, so, of Kentucky. He had a son who fought. He had 2 sons who fought for the Confederacy and another son fought for the Union, like Horseman and Scott. So they'll just make 3630 a permanent slave free border. But no, Republicans are free soil. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Also, a 13th Amendment was proposed. And the 13th Amendment would say slavery is guaranteed constitutionally. No, Republicans will not go for that. And so that failed. And what's ironic about a 13th Amendment that would guarantee slavery, there would be a 13th Amendment. What 13th Amendment? What was the 13th Amendment that was ratified? Yeah, abolishing slavery. Kind of ironic, isn't it? When it was first proposed, it was to be a constitutional guarantee. So those were desperate but futile attempts. Once the Confederacy made that step, they can't go back. They can't go back. And then, what we have is Lincoln's inaugurated. A month later, we have Sumter, which you saw in the video, right? So it's just review, but I love how the New York Times puts it. This is how we spell it today. Sumter. In 1861. And then what's the first major battle of the Civil War that's going to happen a few months later? So there's First Battle of Bull Run. As the Union Army tried to march to Richmond and end the war with one big battle. Remember what I told you? They all thought one big battle will win the war, and that's happened exactly now. And after this, the realization hit that this is going to be a long war. So these are things we've already covered. So let's go then. The thing is, a couple things. The commander of the Union Army by then. So this is review. Oh, who won this battle? It was a big Confederate victory. The Union Army was in shambles. They called it the Great Skedaddle. It was a disaster. Skedaddle? It's not as good as Chapultepec, but yeah, it was. Yes.
So that compromise, was it just that the 3630 was a permanent like?
Yeah, free slave. And that by then was a ridiculous idea. That shows you how desperate they were. You know, California is already a free state. They're not going to cut it in half again. Well, Winfield Scott was the commander of all Union forces, of the United States Army. Now, before the war began, it was less than 30,000 men. The U.S. had some good ships, but even a small navy too. And he came up with a plan. Even though he was very old, infirm, could not mount his horse by then without a winch and a pulley system. Yeah. He could, you know, just think about years of campaigning and being in the army on forts and bad food. He could barely move. Yeah. Poor guy. Yeah, Union. The U.S. commander. Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, would maintain command of the Confederate forces up to the very end. So like just a couple months before the war ended. I like this fighting the mini-snaked secession. His plan, and at first it was ridiculed, but this would become the Union plan, and it's named after this cartoon, the Anaconda Plan, like an anaconda snake strangling the South. And this is a long-term battle plan that has mixed elements of old, but also new industrial fighting. And what it is, it's a three-part plan. Part number one, this snake represents it, a blockade. They will blockade the South, so the South can't trade their cotton, and they can't bring in weapons, especially from Britain. A blockade. Thing is, the Union Navy is small, so it's going to take a year before they're really ready to blockade. Two, take the Mississippi, cut off that commercial river, and split the Confederacy in half. Lots of rivers, big broad rivers in the West, so the West is going to be fighting all over this area. And three, attack into the heartland of the Confederacy, especially get Richmond, the capital, the new capital. I love that cartoon. I love the little caricatures of southern places, but for some reason Alabama just makes me laugh. That's Alabama, as we all know. Yeah.
So the third part was to do what?
Attack into the heartland and take Richmond. Yes.
What was the second part?
Take the Mississippi River. And there's going to be fighting all over. But just to tell you this right now, since we have this map, since Richmond is right here, this would be called the Eastern Theater. And I'm just telling you this now, it makes sense in a sec. And the West is pretty much going to be all this. That'll be the Western Theater. But there's going to be a trans-Mississippi West. Heck, in 1862, they'll be fighting in New Mexico. for the there's some cotton plantations along the Gila River. Yeah.
So, a journalist landed on a plan just to like trap them.
Yeah. Trap them and slowly strangle them. And people thought, the one big victory, this is a slow, prolonged war. No one dreamed it would last till 1865. It'd be so horrible. But it's a modern war, too. It's kind of bits of old, but also industries becoming so important. The South played into the plan. The South actually helped the Union for a year. Here's President Davis. He would be provisional president, but eventually become the president of the Confederacy. And his plan, and most Southerners agreed, it was a very arrogant plan. Davis was very dictatorial, arrogant. Everyone thought he'd be a great president. He was a disaster for the Confederacy. In fact, the only person who was hated more in the South right after the war than Jefferson Davis was Lincoln. But the plan was to keep cotton diplomacy. The British textile mills needed Southern cotton. So let's not trade it. Let's not trade them cotton. If we don't give them cotton, the mills will lose money, there'll be unemployment, and Britain will do what? We don't trade cotton and get Britain to do what? Help them. Yeah, enter the war. It was called intervene. Intervene. Now, Britain doesn't have at all a big army, but they have the biggest and best navy in the world. That navy would be enough, in fact, more than enough for a Confederate victory. And Britain, even though they were anti-slavery, the United States was becoming a competitor. They would have liked to knock them down a run. Weren't exactly friends. So, on the surface, it seemed good. It was a disaster. It was such a disastrous idea, King Cotton diplomacy. Because, here's why. It's one of the things I can't believe. Looking back at it, can't believe you're doing this. For a full year, the South did not trade. They sat on their cotton, let it pile on the wharves. Big bales of cotton. Now, the United States was going to blockade, but they didn't have enough ships for a year. By the time the the South realized, when the South realized, we need British supplies, so we got to trade our cotton so we could get the money to buy these supplies. The U.S. Navy was bigger. They were blockading ports. They were beginning to take southern port cities like New Orleans or New Bern, North Carolina, and they couldn't trade. They wasted a full year. A full year. That year was decisive. Without those supplies coming in, the South already has a disadvantage because they have no industry. There was twice as much industry in the city limits of Manhattan alone than there was in the South. All of the South. Based on Manhattan Island. That gives you an idea how deficient they were in industry. So, this is why. Do you remember the Revolutionary War? Washington lost almost every battle. Yes, with French help, they won at Yorktown. Most battles he lost. But what was the one thing he had to do to win the war?
Wait it out.
Say it in.
Wait it out.
Wait it out. Survive. Exactly. If the Confederates would have had those additional supplies, they could have waited longer. They could have done. They would have maybe not have suffered quite as many of those defeats they did in 1863, and they could have won that war because eventually the North would have quit. It almost happened. If the South could have survived, Lincoln might have lost re-election in 1864, and the Confederacy would have won. It really was that close. In fact, in all reality, with just a few breaks, just a few different breaks, just a couple things different happened, the Confederacy would have won. And that's with the screw up of King Cotton diplomacy. They're on the defensive. They have a legitimate shot to win this war. Yeah.
What would it be like now?
It's impossible to even comprehend. I mean, seriously, because the United States could not have survived, so who knows? So we'd have probably broken up different countries.
Would we be like the Middle East?
I don't think so. They have, because their big issue was the European colonization. Messed them up so much. So we didn't have that, but it would be really messed up. Actually, yeah, that might be a good analogy after the Soviet Union collapsed.
So was Davis like? I was kind of confused. Some people didn't like him.
No, didn't like him in the South after the war.
So
They
then
blamed
why
him for
did
the defeat.
I didn't nominate him.
They liked him at first. After the war, they hated him.
Oh.
And he still invented this.
Yeah. But then, 20 years after the war, he became a hero.
Wait, what? So he was loved, hated, loved.
Yeah. Love, hated, love. Yeah.
He was a hero after the.
I know, is it? Because that's when they start doing the war between the states stuff and refining a noble cause, and they start, you know, it's really weird how that happens. It just, but you know, attitudes change. Harry Truman left office as one of the most unpopular presidents in American history, and within 10 years, people are like, "Oh, but wasn't Harry Truman great?" You know, stuff like that happens. So, one more quick thing: Stars and Bars. That's the Confederate flag. That's actually the first one. There would be 4 new states come in after Sumter, so there'd be 11 stars. But that is the flag. That was the flag of the Confederacy. It was the Confederate flag throughout the entire war. That right there is the Stars and Bars. So you see under the flag that's called the Confederate flag. That's not the Confederate flag. That's the Confederate flag. But do you see a problem with this? They found this out at First Bull Run. When I get way back here with parentheses, what do I see?
It looks similar to.
Don't worry about it. Look at this. Yeah, see it? What does that flag look like?
The U.S. flag.
Yeah, you see the problem? That's why the Confederate commander at Bull Run, Beauregard, came up with a new flag. This is the battle flag. It's not the Confederate flag, it's just for their army. The flag we recognize, people say it's Confederate flag, it's actually the Confederate battle flag. And I think you can see why he used it. The cross, you see that from a distance, you know for sure it wasn't a Union flag. And how many stars? Yeah, they're hoping Maryland and Kentucky would come in. Even though there are only 11 states in the Confederacy. They're hoping, you know. That's not the flag of the Confederacy. It's the battle flag. And this would become the flag of the lost cause after the war a little bit. Then it would kind of be relegated to the dustbins of history. It would come back in the 1950s. In the 1950s, the Confederate battle flag would come back as a symbol. And even though a lot of people don't necessarily want to see it as a symbol, this is why it came back. Without a doubt, was the symbol of what?
Racism.
Not so much, I mean, yes, it was pure racism, but they would have said states' rights and stopping the civil rights movement. But yeah, it was clearly racist, without a doubt. That's what it's going to become. And southern states started putting it in their flag, their state flag. They started adding the Confederate battle flag. Look at the Mississippi flag. And they started putting it on their capital. And so it became a very, a pretty controversial flag. Because everybody knew what it meant. We don't want equal rights. That's why we're waving this flag. In fact, one of the weird, surreal things, seeing a University of Mississippi football game, the big deal was to go wave this flag at the game. Especially as the number of African Americans who played for them went up. That was a surreal experience. They finally banned that. They can't do that anymore. You know how they banned it? You can't bring flagpoles into the game. I think that's really a very creative idea.
Wait,
If you don't have a flagpole, how do you wave the flag? So, flags went away. True story. I think it's really funny. One more thing about it, and that's why, as a historical symbol, you know, I would, the Confederate battle flag, I think, would be, it's a good, you know, this is our history, put it up, but since it would have that symbolic meaning afterwards, which, yeah, is real. And you're making a statement when you have that. But it's too bad, because I like the historical symbol, but I won't put it up. This is actually the first Virginia Infantry Regiment's flag. I think that's really cool to say. You also notice the shape, it's square. They were so short of fabric by 1862. True story. This saved a third of the fabric.
You couldn't use cotton to make the flag.
You need a textile mills.
Ooh.
Yeah, you know, Isn't that amazing? You think about, this shows you, that alone shows you all you need to know about the failure of King Cotton diplomacy. When you can't make a cotton flag a full rectangle. So they use that for the whole war. See these flags? So if you ever see reenactors and they got the full rectangular flag like those, inaccurate, go tell them. Scott, though, was seen as too old and infirm. And so Abraham Lincoln replaced Winfield Scott with George McClellan. Well, it's 34, soon to be 35 years old, just about ready to turn 35. West Point graduate, incredibly intelligent. He also ran the Illinois Central Railroad. He won a couple minor battles in West Virginia, actually against Virginia militia commanded by this guy named Robert E. Lee. And so he won this battle, and Lincoln was like young. He won a battle. He put him in command of all the forces around Washington, D.C. He was so dynamic, intelligent, such a good organizer. I mean, this aura of competence, of being a dynamic leader, that Lincoln would later make him command of all U.S. forces. The guy was 35 years old. Had never commanded anything bigger than a company of 100 men. And now he's command of the entire Union Army. And what he did at first is one of the most remarkable things. In fact, since I like the United States, and I'm biased here, I would have wanted the U.S. to win, he made a great army. A great army. Reorganized it after the disaster of Bull Run, made them feel good about themselves, morale went up in just a couple months. And recruits came in. They didn't come into a rabble. They came into a great army. Really was a remarkable thing. And these are the kind of things that, good army, you can end the war earlier and save thousands of lives. Yeah, that's what you got to do. He might not be that man. Yes, they called him Young Napoleon. And gotta ask why? They're all copying portraits of Napoleon, because Napoleon had a lot of them for propaganda. And remember why they did this? I know why? Hands were really hard to paint. And so they would hide their hand. And Napoleon had so many portraits of him like this, that became every general wanted to have a picture like Napoleon. If you don't believe me, paint a hand. It's really hard to paint. And they didn't want this because they look like they're submitting almost. So.
Aren't they just like this?
Huh? Maybe with mittens. I know what you're saying, but that became the style. Well, he named the Army of the Potomac, and this would become the most famous army in American history. Named after a river, and you can see how they're well equipped, well trained. He would make this army to eventually be the army that would win the war. Many generals later. They have to find one. Navy blue wool top, light blue wool pants, keepy hat, all copied after French uniforms. Everybody copies the French militarily. For good reason, actually, the French have very good soldiers, just don't follow French generals in World War II. Very bad thing to do. But, yes, baseball caps came from those. Muskets, still muzzle loading, but now with steel, rifle barrels, 4 times more accurate than Revolutionary War weapons. They could hit something 150, 200 yards accurately. You had to kind of fire up a little bit, but very accurately. They have bayonets, see them fixed right here, but they rarely got that close. I love this picture for lots of reasons, but the biggie, they kind of have them by height and since by the perspective. This man, 3'2". No, just by the perspective, but what a great mustache. I mean, look at that. I like that picture. I just think that's a great picture. And the fight is about union. It's still about union. And the thing is, by the fall of 1861, McClellan now has a great army. And what does he do? He sits. Goes into winter, won't attack. Into 1862, he won't attack. Lincoln is going nuts. In fact, Lincoln would eventually take away his army, or take away command of the whole U.S. Army, and just say, just command this army. And McClellan still refused to attack. Yeah, Lincoln would directly obey him, and McClellan would say, we can't. And that is why 1861 ended very frustratingly. So we're going into 1862. Now we're talking about the East first, then go to the West. We're not going to talk about other things, but we've got to talk about this because this is a place where if a few battles would have turned a different way, we'd have an entirely different course of history. And I'm always fascinated by the decisions they made and how people did things, but just a few things differently. So I put this map up. Here's Washington, D.C. There's Richmond. Look how close they are. That's why all the battles are going to be fought basically here. And there's another thing. I can sleep well at night, knowing that there are maps with arrows protecting us. The Confederates, after Bull Run, entrenched right there, right on the gates of Washington, blockading the Potomac. They had trenches, fortifications, and cannon rippling along that line. It looked like an amazing defensive line. Under it, one of the most popular, beloved commanders in the South. Probably the most beloved general in the South. Yes.
Wait, so were they?
They were right there next to Washington, D.C. I mean, they were right there. And McClellan won't move. I mean, Lincoln's like, at least drive him away from the gates of Washington. Because that's humiliating. Let alone bad tactics. You want to know what the commander was? Joseph E. Johnston, a Virginian with a great beard. Very able, one of the most famous. He's going to come back a number of times in the war, so we got to mention him a couple times. And very cautious, a good defensive general, beloved by his men. McClellan was convinced, though, that Johnston, who had just over 50,000 men, was literally running out of supplies, was actually much bigger. McClellan convinced himself, despite all logic and fact, that Johnston had thousands and thousands of more men than he actually had. And part of the reason was he employed private detectives. Have you ever heard of the Pinkertons? Good story of the war, so I got to tell you. You ever heard of the Pinkertons? They're the first private detective agency. He employed them while he was head of the Illinois Central Railroad. They mostly were like guards on trains. Well, this sign's really famous. The first detective agency, they never sleep, meaning they're always on duty. These private detectives would get what name because of this sign? That's where private eye comes from. We never sleep. Wait. Okay, so take that. Yeah.
So how come McClellan he just didn't attack at all?
He just was convinced himself that he's outnumbered. He thought, if I attack and lose my army, the country's lost.
So was he waiting to make it bigger, or?
McClellan built this incredible army, and then just the best way to look at it is he probably just lost his army. I mean, the weight of the world's on him, and he couldn't deal with it. And let's be honest, most people probably couldn't. But he, of course, continued to act like he was the leader of all and knew everything. He sent these guys down there. Now think about a bunch of guys who were actually railroad guards from Chicago, and they sent them to Virginia. Accents are about the same thing as today. And they walked around, hey, how many troops you guys got? The Confederates figured out real fast, and what did they tell them? We have hundreds of thousands. We have more troops than we know what to do with. We have to send men back. And they believed it. They went back to McClellan and told McClellan, Johnson has 200,000 troops, and McClellan believed it. And Lincoln's like, do the math. Their population is only 5 million whites because they do a census every 10 years. They did the census in 1860. He knew there's no way they could have that many troops. And McClellan believed it. That's when you would have just said, just keep them training troops and put somebody else in. Yeah.
So McClellan thought that there were 200,000 troops when there are actually 50,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the amazing thing is, when McClellan when Johnston finally pulled back, to here, and the Union forces took these lines, the Confederates abandoned them, this is what they found. Look at the cannon rippling through the fortifications. What are they? Yeah, they have logs painted black to look like cannons. This is my favorite photo. They call them Quaker guns. Get it? Because they're pacifists. Now, a rational person, this would tell you, Johnston is what? The Confederates are what? Cowards. Maybe not cowards, because they're trying to hold a position.
They're lying.
They're lying about the number of men. They're probably a lot weaker. McClellan said, no, they're stronger than I thought. They're using this to get us overconfident and suck us in. Lincoln was by then thinking, I gotta fire this guy. But he couldn't because the men loved him. And Lincoln was terrified that McClellan would turn around and march on Washington, D.C. and make himself dictator. Now that seems almost weird today to think about it. They were really scared. And McClellan kind of talked about it. Maybe I should be dictator. I'm not that way, though, am I? Yeah, true. It's weird to think about it today, but that's what was going on. And one more disaster happened. Right here, there's a big long valley right here. This is called the Shenandoah Valley. And a small Confederate force under Stonewall Jackson, who became famous at Bull Run, defeated Union Army after Union Army. Now, the thing is, it's not like this this earth-shattering victories, but it just seemed to show the Lincoln in the North, we can't beat these guys. And Jackson, interesting guy, he's going to get this incredible reputation, especially after war, because he died during the fighting. But he was either a great general or just a horrific mess. He was kind of crazy. He would be this dynamic leader who would lead his men on marches and win these great victories. Or in other battles, he would decide, I'm tired. I'm going to take a nap under a tree. Yes, he did that a number of times during battles. He was just a weird guy. Jackson, Stonewall Jackson,
And he's with
Confederates. He got this nickname, we don't know if it's an insult or a compliment, to this day, because the general who gave it, the general by the name of Bee, died in a battle called Ball's Bluff. We don't know if he was saying, there's Jackson standing like a stone wall, meaning not retreating. Or there's Jackson standing like a stone wall and not advancing to help us. It could have been either one. We don't know. But it's going to become this great nickname. He was just a weird guy. He would ride into battle with one arm up like this to equalize the blood. Then he would switch. There's other things about him. Yeah.
So what was like the big thing for Shenandoah Valley?
The big thing was, it was an important valley to the south, and the Confederates held it. But the big thing was, it just seemed to show that the Confederates could not be beat. And it made Lincoln even more furious. And what we're going to lead to is this. McClellan finally acted. And we're talking over a series of many months of the spring of 1862. And this is the decisive year, because remember what I told you. The war is still about union. If the war ends in 1862, the issue of slavery, the underlying causes of the war, still exists. And we would have a different course of history. And McClellan is going to have a golden opportunity to win the war. Who knows how history would have been different? All we would know for sure is that there would have been a President McClellan. And there almost was one. We almost had President McClellan. So what McClellan decided to do is, Johnson's here, outflank him, and land down here with his navy. And this is going to be called, the Peninsular Campaign. It's the James Peninsula. The same peninsula that had the Jamestown. Remember Jamestown from colonial America? And it almost worked. Oh, it almost worked. But before we get to that, I got to tell you one quick naval battle. It's actually two ships, they dueled. And the first clash of ironclads. Ironclads are, it's CLAD. Ironclad is one word. I should have put that up there. Iron armored ships. All these navies were wooden. Well, the Confederates, on an old Union hull that they tried to sink so the Union wouldn't get it, they put iron plating at angles like this. Basically, just kind of slap iron from boilers and various things on there. The ship leaked. The engines did not work. It was a poorly designed ship, but cannonballs could not penetrate that iron. And when the first day it went out, it immediately sunk 3 Union ships. But the Union worked, it's called the Merrimack. And that's the Confederate ironclad. When the Union heard about that, they built a specially designed iron ship called the Monitor. Low in the water, and it had a turret that turned by hand so the cannon could fire at 360 degrees, not just on the side of the ships. They would fight a day-long duel, a draw. But the Merrimack was flooding and it lit back and never came out again. You think a draw, big deal. Cannonballs just bounced right off the iron. That meant that every single ship in every single navy was obsolete because an ironclad would knock them out of the water. And everybody, including the British, they all had to start building ironclads. They think, okay, whatever, Civil War ironclads, great. This is why it's important. Only industrial countries can build that. What it means is the strength of the army, or another way to look at it is the strength of the country now relies on industry. If you don't have industry, you are now vulnerable to other countries. You're not less brave, you're not less talented, but if you don't have industry, you don't have the technology. And these ships proved it. Technology will become key. So key that I'm going to have to tie my shoes to emphasize this fact. Yeah, proved. So, with that, yeah.
Please excuse the interruption. Seniors, tomorrow is the FAFSA priority deadline. So if you need help with your FAFSA,
Tomorrow's limbo day. You can't.
Before 3 o'clock today. Again, if you need help with your FAFSA, please come to the Career Center today before 3.
Who went on
The North. Let me finish this real quick. I know the bell rang. Let me finish a couple things real quick. Yes.
Okay, so Merrimack was for the
Confederates. The Fort Monitor, do you see how low it is in the water? Can anyone guess how it sunk off the coast of North Carolina? Big wave.
yeah.
Come on. True story. Yeah. Yeah, they found they're both. The Merrimack, the Confederates burned, so the Union didn't get it. They found the Monitor. Yeah. And so there's in fact, there was a National Geographic special about it. It's really cool. Let me finish this real quick. What I meant though is industry now is just as important as troops for war. And this proves it. Wait, if industry is important, what's target? I know. Deal with it. And I'm saying it so you have to know it. Factories, and not just the factories, the workers. Civilians are now legitimate targets of war. Now, leave my presence.
Oh.
Wow, me. The thing is that tomorrow you guys won't be walking out.
Oh gosh. Where are we getting those tests back?
Oh, you know, I could have given them today, but I didn't.
Can you give them tomorrow? 'Cause
I'll give it tomorrow. You did what?
I might be gone.
So do you know for sure? Let me give you that sheet for the DBQ.
Just asking if Shannon,
If you're not, do you have it?
Yeah, say
I'm not saying that. What you have to master? Is it good? Good. You know, it's funny how my musical taste was pretty much formed when I was your age.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago, so I still kind of just listened to them. We're good. Oh, that's fine. And you'll be here. But this is it's a lot of the same things for an essay, but it comes with a modified here. How to sign the documents. I'm just going to give this one quickly talk about it. I'm going to help you guys kind of think about organizing it. It's all in the writing. Actually, why do you wait till same light. Okay. You're okay, Mary. Woo! Yeah, he said I was talking about Freud, so I gave him Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. What? No, not just. I'll get it back. Okay. Yeah, as well as a great day in AP Euro when I speak that. Sit down. Oh, what is next month? Limbo month. Limbo month is. Oh, you're.
Do I get any more extra?
I don't make the rules. You should have planned this.
Just putting it like
No. Well, we'll start here, but that's.
Yeah.
Do you like make us something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Possible too.
I don't make the rules. I just
do that one day.
And then April is Twister month. No.
Remember William Shelton?
Yeah. Oh my God. I did that one time. I put the limbo stick between the two desks, and he almost got under it.
Almost?
Yeah.
Oh, William.
He might have, but I think he started falling backward. Yeah, William. That was scary. William. Yeah.
He's literally like
Yeah, like
I got from Goodwill that once or twice when something smells like grandma, like not in a bad way, just like this was definitely grandma.
Yeah, I'm not letting him near me. That gave me
I mean, grandma smell nice. Yeah, just like kind of like rose perfume smell. I wear grandma's
Limbo month is next month. Wait a minute. Wait, not next month. Tomorrow.
I thought I saw the limbo stick this morning.
Yeah, there it is. It's out. And you know what? This has gone through the battles. This has gone through. What's it made out of? Hard work, yes. Sweat, blood, sweat, and tears. It's aluminum for Festivus. And what is Festivus? For the rest. Thank you. I do have a problem with Festivus, though. All right, so going to take your notes out for this.
What's your problem with Festivus?
Everybody, who last year watched Festivus? Anyone watch the Festivus episode here?
I didn't know who you were, and like Taylor Blossom and like Hannah Ludlow made me come with them to this, and you were really weird, and then I didn't really want to take your class.
Why was I weird?
You were just being like, you were just like crazy teacher, and I was like, I don't want to take this class.
And then you took two of my classes. All right, good. Right. And I knew I tried everything I could to keep it out. Huh? Yeah, it was full.
It was a miracle. I got a front row seat, but I also like didn't sit anywhere.
Yeah, and there were people on the floor and stuff. Well, the only problem is this: I always show up that last day before our Festivus break, the Festivus documentary. But the problem is this: I'm not going to be here that day.
That's for our one.
I think I'm gonna have Mr. Cooney show up. Or I'll talk to him about the problem. The day that last because we have like a 45-minute lunch that day, so it was more than enough time to show it. So I don't know. I gotta decide. I'm gonna be gone. Save the world. Where's you going? Save the world. Can't tell you. See.
If only you had
Huh?
2 weeks.
Well, yeah, I'll be on this world.
Because we have one. Wait, we have a weekend and then Monday, and then we have like 1 day.
Okay, so let's go and take the notes. I just started talking about the different people who are involved in the September 11th attack.
Yes, at least 3 weeks.
Oh, I'm still recording the class.